Welcome back to the Teach for Justice podcast. Stephanie Howell is a dedicated education technology advocate with a rich background in supporting diverse learners. Diagnosed with a learning disability in second grade, she has channeled her personal experiences into a passionate advocacy for students with disabilities. Her mission centers on creating personalized and differentiated learning experiences that empower every student to overcome obstacles. As a founding member of Global GEG and Gold EDU, Stephanie has been instrumental in promoting best practices in education. She currently contributes her expertise to CAMI, an interactive learning platform where she focuses on enhancing student engagement and collaboration. I had the honor of and pleasure of meeting Stephanie recently at the Illinois Digital Educator Alliance Conference, known as IdeaCon, where we both were featured speakers and thought leaders. And I'm grateful and excited to have her on the show. Welcome, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
So, your personal journey, having been diagnosed with a learning disability in second grade, has profoundly influenced your advocacy for students with disabilities. How has this experience shaped your approach to integrating technology in special education?
Yeah, being diagnosed with a learning disability and kind of reflecting now, I think it was dyslexia, but back then we didn't call it dyslexia, right? And
Right.
so it was a big struggle. My parents really had to advocate for me because there wasn't a lot of inclusion back when I was in second grade. It was a lot of pull out, which wasn't the appropriate place for me to learn. And so my parents had to do a lot of that advocacy, meeting with principals, meeting with the special education director to really push and explain why I needed to be in the regular ed setting and then just pulled out for like tutoring. So my parents honestly were my biggest advocates when it came to that. And I just remember that in school, because I didn't have technology, I needed a human reader, or I
Right.
had to use like a tape player or like CD-ROM. And I had to know exactly where now kids can just click. They're able to click on the word that they don't know. Where for me, I had to like listen to the entire chapter just to get to the last paragraph, or I had to wait for the teacher to be available, or I had to wait for me to go into my tutoring class to ask that teacher, what was this word? And so it was very difficult not having technology. And so when I became a teacher and technology became such a huge part of my classroom, it was teaching those kids those skills and teaching them that metacognition of, I don't understand this. Let's take a pause and let's use the computer to have this be read aloud. Let's allow this. I mean, I remember having to take my test twice because I felt embarrassed leaving the room, and I was doing so poorly on my test that my parents again advocated, and they went to that teacher and they were just like, she's going to do the test twice. She will do the test with her typical peers in the classroom because she felt embarrassed leaving,
Right.
and then when I go to that time where multiple students were leaving the classroom, she's going to go and have a human reader read it to her. So again, my parents were a huge advocate, but now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have to take that test twice. Or if my teachers knew about psychological safety, I might have felt comfortable being who I was and having that disability to leave the classroom and take ownership of, yeah, I do struggle in school, but here's some supports that can really help me.
In listening to that, one of the things that hit me right before you said, the supports the teachers need to have an awareness of it was just the idea that a student needs to check in with themselves, right? If you've done work on regulating your nervous system, you know that sometimes your nervous system is reacting to something that might not necessarily be a threat, right? A bear is not chasing you, but a second grader is not going to know
Yeah.
what that feeling is and how to regulate it. And so, to what degree now, as an advocate, are you encouraging teachers to say, hey, how are you feeling right now, right? What's going on with you when you get to this point?
Yeah, so as an instructional coach, I did a lot of work on executive functioning, and I wrote a book about executive functioning and how students sometimes misbehave or sometimes act a little out of their normal self because they're lacking in an executive functioning skill. And usually when I show this graphic, we have all the executive functioning skills, but we also, before I show what executive functioning skill it is, it's a bunch of like fixed mindset type of terms. So maybe like stubborn, misbehaved, unorganized. And teachers start to, that's how they talk about their students. At least when I was, in lunchrooms, I even talked about my students sometimes that way, or even my own kids. I'm like, my son, he's so stubborn. He's so stubborn. He's 5 years old, and this child is super stubborn. But when you pair that up with an executive functioning skill, for me, it moves it to that growth mindset. And so when I'm like, oh my gosh, AJ's so stubborn, where now I'm like, no, this child really lacks when it comes to goal directed behavior. This child lacks when it comes to flexibility. It's not
Right.
that he's stubborn. I can work on flexibility. I can work on goal setting with him. And when I do those things, our relationship is a lot easier than me like constantly pushing that he's just stubborn, right? And I can work on those skills. I can give him different scaffolds and supports so he can be successful in new adventures when trying new things instead of just that fixed mindset of he's always going to be that way.
Right. He is this way, or they are this way, and that's kind of it. And either work around it or ignore it, or just shrug your shoulders and make the best of it. And it doesn't have to be, we don't need to be this, I don't want to use the word lazy, but I just feel like teachers have to come to grips with their own discomfort of maybe not knowing how to, create a better environment for some of these kids. Because for some teachers, it might mean, they got to learn again, and they got to admit that they don't have a handle on it. But isn't that kind of what it requires?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, in your role with Gold EDU, you've emphasized the importance of personalized and differentiated learning experiences. What strategies have you found most effective in implementing personalized learning within public education systems?
Yeah, and so with Gold EDU, it is an online Google group. So there are a ton of people, and I would love to invite whoever's interested. It's completely free to join. It's just a community where different educators are sharing ideas and resources and thoughts and even roadblocks that come to education. I think when it comes to implementing personalized learning, every teacher, you also have to personalize their support because some teachers might struggle with that classroom management piece. And so if that's for them, that's where you've got to start for them. Some people, it's differentiating the different scaffolds within the classroom. Other people, they're like, I just need more resources. I just need more activities that my students that can do either higher or lower based on maybe Bloom's taxonomy or DOK. And so again, it's really kind of figuring out what is the pain point for that teacher in that classroom before figuring out what personalized learning to support that teacher or that group of teachers. And so I'm actually working on a second book, and it's all about kind of personalized learning and all of the different foundations and all the different structures to kind of figure out what you need in order to support your classroom. But one of my favorite strategies is once the classroom management is set, is using like a roadmap or a game board just to organize the self-paced learning. That can help a lot of executive functioning skills when it comes to personalized learning, like goal setting. And it also supports students tracking to see where they are in their progress. So they know, okay, I am understanding this or I'm not understanding this.
So just to focus in on that point, you use game boards because you find that students respond well to that idea of having a goal, moving forward, getting that sort of positive feeling with breaking up the destination into smaller chunks. Love it. Um, Differentiation and scaffolding, I think, in my 20 years of teaching, I really have, I will admit, I have found that that can be difficult depending on your site. And it also requires, um, staying on top of the kids in front of you in terms of what does your population look like? I was at a district within the last 10 years where there was a demographic shift in terms of English learners and things like that. And we had to have some tough conversations about as your the kids in front of you change, your community changes, then your response needs to change. And I think where you're at with really helping coach teachers with differentiation and scaffolding specifically is where a lot of people need to be, get that refresher. And I think and I appreciate it, and I think the results speak for themselves. In that GEG group, can you talk just a little bit more about that for people who are hesitant, who have never joined a Google group like that? Like, what is it easier than people might think? What are the benefits of being able to go in there? Do you have to bare your soul about everything you need help with?
Yeah, so the reason it's a Google group is because I come from the Google community. I'm a Google trainer, coach, and innovator. So I just have really adapted to Google. And so when it first started, I didn't think it was going to get as big as it did. And
Oops.
so it got a lot larger, right? Just because of the time. And I think people really see the value in that community. And so it is a Google group. And what I like about the Google group is you can choose your email settings. You can get every single email live as people are emailing in. You can also turn it so you would get like a summary or a digest where you can get like kind of every other day or every single morning. You would get kind of a way to get communicated of what has happened the previous day.
Nice.
There's also a way to get no emails. So if you're like, I just want to click and go into the group on my own, that's one way for you. So again, there's kind of that kind of setup is what I like is people can personalize how they want to be communicated. And it can change. Like maybe certain seasons of your life, you're ready for more emails. Maybe another season you need it turned off. So you can kind of do that as well. It's also coming to your email. So people are most likely able to respond with resources and support and ideas right away. And so again, that's going right into the inbox of a lot of different people around this world that have a lot of different perspectives. It's not just coming from your district. You're getting ideas from somebody who might be in New York or California or Chicago or maybe even South Africa, right? Like it is global. So you're getting a lot of different perspectives and kind of a moment to just step back and say, oh, I didn't know that. And we do have lurkers. We have people that don't always, participate. They're just kind of there.
Right.
And that's when I find them at conferences and they're like, I love your group. And I'm like, I had no idea you remember.
Right, because you don't engage.
But yeah, so it's just, again, you kind of find your spot when you're able to contribute. I would love for you to contribute. But if you're also kind of more shy and just trying to figure out what it is, you can find all that information at goldedu.org. And then there's a link to join the community.
And so before we move on, does a person to join, do they have to be, have that Google Innovator status and, all the certifications, or is it anyone can join and get the help that they might be looking for?
Yeah, anyone can join. I would say majority of our group is coaches. So there are some teachers, but I would say majority of the population is instructional coaches. So you also, if you are a teacher, I feel like you get the benefit of having over 9,000 different coaches in the group just supporting you and cheering you on. But yeah, it's a great community. So I highly suggest joining it. And then again, choose the email that works best for you.
Right. And whether you find your coach at your district valuable or you had certain perceptions of your coach, you might join the group and realize, oh, instructional coaches, they seem pretty cool. I'll just maybe it'll encourage them to reach out to theirs and establish that more local bond also potentially. I'm really interested in this personalized learning portion that you focus on. What are some primary challenges, though, that public schools face when integrating personalized learning into and how can educators overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, I think time. Also, we are struck by that state of test by the end of the year, right? That is one obstacle where every single student, even though you want to self-pace, you want to meet students where they are, you have that end of state test where students have to take the test and hopefully they pass with flying colors because you want to show how much they've grown. You've worked hard as an educator yourself. So I think that is the biggest hurdle is sometimes students need self-pacing, they need differentiation, they need scaffolding. And so for me, one of the biggest barriers that I would say when it comes to that end of year test and the timing is really looking over your students' data throughout the year. So as they're doing formative, summative assessments, looking over that data, really, if you can, try to base it on standards and see where are they lacking, where do they need more spiral review. I love to use spiral review as kind of a bell ringer. So that way we're constantly reviewing information throughout the entire year. It's not just a one and done. And so again, it's kind of going back, looking at that data, thinking through, okay, here's where I need to focus more time. Here's where I need to pull more of my small groups. This is where I need to maybe group these students that are struggling with this standard. And really just, again, looking over that data and using it to help you make informed decisions. And then always looking at those standards too, and differentiation basing on that standard. A lot of our standards are at a DOK level 2 or 3. And so because of that, we sometimes teach to the DOK level 1. We're not reaching the standard if we do that. So we have to challenge our students to get to higher levels of those DOKs, which also encourages us as teachers to think about different tasks that aren't always at the DOK level 1, but moving to those 2, 3, and 4 type of activities as well.
Right. It's literally impossible for the kids to master a standard if you stay at DOK1 and keep the questions very, comprehension related. And I think that too often teachers fall into that trap, right, of saying, well, I have my students are behind or they're low, and so they quote unquote can't handle this. And it does take a rethinking. And I appreciate what you said about the data, because data can be intimidating for a lot of teachers. And so what I think people who follow you or who work with you are getting is a sense of, okay, you don't have to look at all the data. If you look at a couple of different places, you might be able to get moving forward a little bit quicker than some other folks who are sitting there overwhelmed on where do we begin. All right, you have highlighted the significance of building relationships in educational settings. How does fostering strong relationships between educators and students impact learning outcomes, particularly in the context of this personalized learning?
Yeah, relationships are tricky, right? Because sometimes you think it's just getting to know your students, and there's a lot more to it. And so I started to really begin to research what is it that creates a classroom where teachers and students just love to be in. Students feel comfortable with risk taking, because honestly, when I was in school, I didn't feel comfortable taking risks. I didn't feel comfortable trying things outside of what I didn't know. And that was huge for me. And so I started to be like, how do I create this environment where people feel comfortable taking risk? And after the Google Innovator Academy is when I really started to focus in on this, because at the Google Innovator Academy, prior to it, I was still that person that like wasn't willing to try new things or take risk, but I was surrounded by a community of people that created this psychological safe environment where
Right.
it was okay to fail. And I was like, wait, what? Like, it's okay if I don't do well on this, and it's okay if you change your mind. And they walked me through the design thinking process, and I absolutely fell in love with that model and the way that I felt at Google. I felt valued. I felt like my feedback mattered. And so after leaving the Google Innovator Academy, I went back to my district and I was like, I want to create that environment for my teachers. I was an instructional coach at the time. How do I create that environment where teachers feel comfortable working with me, where they'll try a new idea, and if it doesn't work, it's okay? How do I create an environment where they can tell me they hate something instead of lying to me? How do I
Right.
create an environment where students feel safe to try new things? And so as I started to research, I realized that there was a lot of backing behind this environment. Adam Grant is a great resource if you're looking for a book or something. He's a great author that talks about this psychological safety, where when we feel comfortable to fail and try new things, we have a lot more success, and we're willing to strive to try again those harder tasks. We're able to challenge ourselves. We're able to feel comfortable asking questions. And so again, it took a lot of that back end work of just building that trust and that environment where people just felt safe. I was valuing their feedback. I was I wasn't just shutting them down when they said, "Oh, I don't get this." I'm like, "What do you mean you don't get this?" Right? It was more of, "Okay, well, what is it that you don't understand? What is it that you have questions about?" And creating that environment where they felt comfortable to keep on going and using questioning techniques to really help educators understand their next schools.
Yeah, like, get curious. So if a student says they don't understand, get curious instead of like critical, right?
Mhm.
The concept of risk taking came up a lot just now. And do you feel like part of the risk that I don't think a lot of teachers factor in is students are going to be, to what degree have you found this to be true? Students are less willing to take risks if they don't see their teacher taking risks.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. If students don't see the teacher trying things, and one of the ISTE standards that took me a lot to like understand and wrap my head around is a teacher needs to try a new technology tool in front of their students without even looking at it. That's like one of the standards where you go and you like walk through how to use it and you're like, "Oh, I wonder what this button does." But that type of thinking where you are walking through, you're explaining your thoughts, your ideas, and you're questioning, "What do you guys think this does? What do you guys think this does?" And you're allowing that exploration of time really, really is magical and powerful. Even though it does take a couple extra moments at the beginning of the year to create, it's going to be worth it in the end.
And I would imagine, going back to the relationships part, you're building a relationship with the students because you're doing something together as opposed to handing them a about me, thing to fill out, right? Filling out the about me paper at the first week of school doesn't necessarily lead to a risk-taking environment.
Hmm.
Love
Yeah.
it. And actually, the technology part leads us right into our next question here. Looking ahead, right? What emerging educational technologies do you believe hold the most promise for supporting students in special education, and how can schools best prepare to integrate these emerging technologies?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of these tools already available, and I'm really interested to see how AI continues to play a part in personalized learning and even making, translation more accessible or
Yeah.
making resources that are adaptable at a different grade level. So I'm really excited to see how AI continues to play a role. But I think a lot of times is, are we supporting teachers with the tools? Are we teaching students how to advocate for themselves to be able to just use the tool? I know in my district, we had a tool in our district for years that was student facing to support them with accessibility. And I don't think we did it justice on teaching students how to use the tool on their own, how to go and click what they needed. If they needed something read aloud, we really didn't support them with that option or with that support. And so that was just something that was, kind of noticeable when we were like, oh my gosh, students don't even know how to use this tool. And so we need to take the time to teach them how to use some of the tools that we already have. I think we also need to think about how do we ensure that districts have the money to pay for them. If it is a paid program, a lot of accessibility tools are behind that paid um,
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word is, but like
Right.
paid kind of like platform, right? Like it's not part of usually the free version. Usually districts do have to pay for it. And so it's like, how do we make sure that districts are spending those monies and teachers aren't just spending their own money to pay for those products?
I think though it really does go back to the beginning that you've been emphasizing this relationships piece, because there's two relationships here, I think, at play when you make the claim that we need to be better at getting teachers and students to use some of the really effective technology we have, and that's having a teacher comfortable enough with someone to say, "Hey, I know I went to the training, but I don't really know how to use this. I was on my phone the whole time, or I didn't go to the training, or it was on Zoom and I was doing some other stuff." And then, but then also it's the student needing to be able to advocate for themselves, whether they're EL or they have, a challenge with how they're learning that information, to be able to say, you know what, someone told me to use the tool and I'm not using it. I know you think I'm using it, but I'm not, because I don't know all the buttons, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And it just comes back to relationships. And I agree with you. And I hope people listening who are, maybe not all in on some of the relationship building stuff, if you're gonna hear Stephanie talk about the risk taking and all of the benefits that come from it, just the growth, right? We don't grow in comfort. Please consider taking that last little step, because I think I mean, look how happy Stephanie is, right? Look at how much joy she's just exuding. I went to Google and did all this stuff. I went to the Google offices one time in Irvine, California, and I don't remember anything I saw. I just remember the vibe.
Mhm.
How I felt. I think you used the word comfortable and encouraged. Like, I really felt like, wow, you really could try stuff here. And I don't know that that's the vibe in lunchrooms. You mentioned lunchroom earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know that the lunchroom is the place where people are like, hey, let's talk about something new. Maybe some, okay, but I have yet to be in one of those. Um, so, but yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And so, all right. So it is tradition for our podcast to end always with the same question. So I'm going to give you the platform. Stephanie Howell, what does it mean to you to teach for justice?
Yeah, so teaching for justice means that I think ensuring that all students, regardless of what disability or ability they have that equal access to high quality education, right? That no matter again where they're coming from, their background or disability that they might have, they're having those meaningful opportunities and the support that they need to thrive in them, that psychological safety where they feel safe to take those risks and vibe where it's, comfortable for them. I think we also need to advocate, right? My parents were huge advocates for me. And without having my parents, I don't know if I would have made it throughout that system as easier as I did. But again, having teachers, having other educators advocating for students, because sometimes I think that psychological safety is gone from our teachers. And so making sure that they feel safe to speak up. Hey, I noticed this about my student. I noticed this about this child. And again, sometimes I think we shut teachers down when they have those feelings. I know I have in an IEP meeting when I've tried to spoken up my first year of teaching, it was like, no, we don't think that way, Stephanie. No, we can't offer that accommodation because of this, because of that, right? And so again, it's creating an inclusive environment where every single learner feels valued and empowered.
Love it. And that's why she's an advocate, a consultant, a Google innovator, a featured speaker, a thought leader, an author, and just a really, really good human. So I appreciated being able to meet you at IdeaCon. It was awesome. I'm so grateful that you took some time out of all of the amazing things you're doing to come over here on the show. And I think, where can people find you and support you, and also get support from you also here before we sign off?
Yeah, so make sure you join the Google group Gold EDU. We would love for you to join. So again, that's just goldedu.org to find all of those information, or you can find me on social media. I'm at Mrs. Howe24, I think on all the platforms. So you can also find me there, and I'm happy to connect. Send me a direct message, and I can definitely share any strategies or resources if you're stuck or if you just want somebody to brainstorm with. Happy to be that person.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.